Get out of here right now, you filthy and smelly person. Someone like you has no right to sit in that seat. I'm the only one who deserves to sit there.
How many people walked past a bleeding teenage girl before anyone decided she was still a child? Ava Carter sat frozen in a metal chair beside gate B42 at John F. Kennedy International Airport. Her wrists were locked behind her. A plastic restraint cut deep into her skin. Blood slid down her fingers, one drop at a time, landing on the gray airport carpet beneath her sneakers. She did not scream. Not at first. She was too stunned for that. A few feet away, first-class passengers kept boarding for Flight 9002 to London. Some slowed down. Some stared. Some looked away the moment her eyes met theirs. That was the part Ava would remember later. Not the pain, not the blood, the looking away. Inside the jet bridge, the air smelled like rain, fuel, and wet metal. Outside, a storm rolled over Queens, throwing pale flashes of light across the airport windows. The Boeing 747 waited at the gate, huge and bright, its engines humming low like something alive. Ava had been sitting in seat 1A less than 10 minutes earlier. She had curled into the wide leather seat with her backpack tucked against her leg, her charcoal hoodie pulled over her dark curls, and her noise-canceling headphones resting around her neck. She was 18, but exhaustion made her look younger. 2 sleepless nights, finals at her boarding school in Connecticut, a late charity chess event in Brooklyn. A flight to London she had not wanted to miss. All she wanted was quiet, a few hours of sleep, a window seat. That was all. Then Victoria Whitmore arrived. She moved through first class as if the cabin had been built around her. Cream suit, pearl earrings, hair sprayed into a perfect silver blonde shell. Her handbag looked expensive enough to pay someone's rent for a year. Her eyes landed on Ava, and her mouth tightened before she said a word. "Excuse me." Ava did not hear her at first. The second time, Victoria tapped her shoulder. No, not tapped, pushed. Ava pulled one headphone away. "Yes, Mom?" Victoria looked down at her like Ava had tracked mud across white carpet. "You are in my seat." Ava blinked, still half inside the fog of sleep. She glanced at the small display beside the suite door, then at her phone, seat 1A. She turned the screen gently toward the woman. "I think there may be a mistake. This is my assigned seat." Victoria let out a short laugh, not amused, insulted. "Your assigned seat." She looked around the cabin, inviting witnesses before the trial had even begun. "Do you hear that?" The child says this is her assigned seat. A man across the aisle lowered his newspaper. An older couple stopped whispering. A young woman in row 3 lifted her phone, then lowered it, unsure if this was something to record or something to survive by pretending not to see. Ava kept her voice calm. "I can show the boarding pass. It's scanned at the gate." Victoria's smile disappeared. "Honey, economy is behind the curtain. You had your picture. You had your fun. Now move before this becomes embarrassing." Ava felt heat rise in her throat. Her father's voice came back to her. "Pause before you answer. People show you who they are when they think you have no power." So Ava paused. Then she said, very quietly, "I paid for this seat. I am not moving." That was when Melissa Grant stepped in. Melissa was the lead flight attendant, late 40s, perfect red lipstick, navy uniform pressed sharp enough to cut paper. She came quickly when Victoria raised 2 fingers, the way certain passengers summon service without using names. "Is there a problem, Mrs. Whitmore?" Ava noticed that. Mrs. Whitmore, not mom, not passenger, a name, a relationship, an alliance. Victoria placed one hand against her chest. "There is a serious problem. This girl is refusing to leave my seat." Melissa turned to Ava. Her expression changed in 1 second. The smile died. Her eyes moved over the hoodie, the frayed backpack, the scuffed white sneakers. Then her face settled into something cold and practiced. "Miss, I need to see your boarding pass." Ava held out her phone. "Here." Melissa barely looked. "Mobile passes glitch all the time." Ava frowned. It did not glitch. It scanned. Melissa exhaled through her nose. "Seat 1A is usually held for our highest priority premium members. A teenager traveling alone does not just end up there by accident." Victoria murmured, "Exactly," loud enough for everyone to hear. Ava sat a little straighter. "My father booked it." Melissa's eyes narrowed.
"And who is your father?"
Ava hesitated, not because she was ashamed, because she hated using his name. Jonathan Carter's name changed rooms. It changed voices. It made people smile who had been cruel one breath earlier. Ava had learned early that if people only respected her after they knew who he was, they had not respected her at all. So she said, please just check the manifest. Melissa did not move. I am not delaying an international departure because you want to play games with a phone screen. I am not playing games. Then Victoria leaned closer and lowered her voice just enough to make it poisonous. She smells like weed. Ava's eyes widened.
What?
Melissa sniffed the air once, theatrically. I smell it too. That was the first lie. The second came faster. Melissa lifted the interphone. Captain, we have a non-compliant passenger in first class. Possible intoxication, refusing to leave a premium seat. Ava's heart started to pound. The cabin changed after that. Not loudly, quietly. The way people decide who is safe and who is dangerous without knowing a single fact. Ava looked from face to face. The man with the newspaper looked down. The older woman pressed her lips together. Someone whispered, these kids today. Ava reached for her phone with shaking fingers. Dad, JFK, Flight 9002, they are trying to remove me, please. The reply came almost instantly. Stay where you are. Do not resist. I am landing in 4 minutes. But 4 minutes can be a lifetime when nobody sees you as human. 2 airport security contractors entered the cabin. Cole Ramsey was first, big shoulders, buzz cut, utility belt heavy on his hips. Behind him came Tyler Brooks, younger, thinner, his eyes already uncertain. Cole did not ask for Ava's ticket. He did not ask her name. He looked at Melissa.
Where is the threat?
Melissa pointed. There. Victoria added. She lunged at me. Ava stared at her. I never moved. Cole stepped closer. Up. Ava gripped the armrest. Please check the manifest. Up. My father is coming. Cole reached down and grabbed her arm hard. Ava gasped. You are hurting me. Stop resisting. I'm not resisting. He pulled her out of the seat so fast her backpack strap caught on the console. Her shoulder twisted. Her chest struck the cabin wall with a dull thud. Someone gasped. Someone else started recording. Tyler's face tightened.
Cole, she is just a kid.
Cole did not look back. Sit down, he barked to the cabin. Everybody stay seated. Then came the restraints. Plastic. Black. Industrial. Ava felt them loop around her wrists. She tried to breathe. She tried to stay calm. Then Cole pulled. The zip tie bit into her skin. Too tight, she whispered. He pulled again. Pain shot up both arms. Please, it is too tight. Melissa stood nearby, arms folded. You should have thought about that before committing ticket fraud. Something in Ava broke then, not loudly, not dramatically. Just a small collapse inside her chest. She was 18 years old. She had a valid ticket. She had done everything right. And still, a room full of adults had decided she was guilty because she did not look like their idea of first class. Cole shoved her toward the jet bridge. Her foot caught on the metal lip of the doorway. With her hands bound behind her, she could not catch herself. She fell hard, chin first, then shoulder, then wrists. The plastic cut deeper. This time, Ava screamed. Tyler rushed forward. Cole, stop. She is bleeding. Cole looked. It is a scratch. But it was not a scratch. Blood ran fast now, bright against her brown skin, bright against the floor, bright enough that even the passengers at the gate stopped pretending not to see. Melissa checked her watch. Boarding closes in 2 minutes. Put her somewhere out of the way. So they did. They chained Ava to a metal airport chair beside the gate counter while first class continued to board behind her. Her fingers tingled, then burned, then went numb. Ava lowered her head and whispered one word, Dad. At the far end of the terminal, a private access door opened. The sound was small, but the whole gate seemed to feel it. 6 men in dark suits stepped through first, moving with quiet precision. Behind them came a tall man in a charcoal overcoat, silver at his temples, his face still as stone. Jonathan Carter did not look around. He did not ask where to go. He saw the blood. He saw the chair. He saw his daughter. And the airport, for one long breath, went silent. Jonathan Carter crossed the terminal without raising his voice, and somehow every person near gate B42 knew to move. It was not the suit, though the suit was tailored, dark, and expensive, in the quiet way only old money and serious power could afford. It was not the security detail, though the men around him moved with calm purpose, scanning faces, exits, cameras, hands. It was the look in his eyes, cold, focused, terrified, the kind of fear only a parent knows. Ava saw him through the blur of pain. For 1 second, she thought her mind had made him up, the way children imagine rescue when the room gets too loud. But then he was there, lowering himself in front of her, not caring about the blood on the carpet, not caring about the people staring. Ava. His voice cracked on her name. That one crack did what the zip ties had not done. It broke her. Daddy. She tried to lift her hands toward him, but the restraints held her to the chair. Her fingers were swollen now. The skin around her wrists had turned purple beneath the blood. Her breathing came in short, frightened pulls. Jonathan saw it all. The zip tie, the metal cuff looped through it, the chair. His daughter chained in public like a criminal, while passengers walked past with rolling bags and paper coffee cups. For a moment, he did not speak. That silence scared Melissa Grant more than shouting would have. She stood near the jet bridge entrance with her clipboard held against her chest. Her face had gone pale. A few minutes earlier, she had been firm, almost proud. Now her lips were parted, and her eyes moved between Jonathan and the silver pin on one of his guard's lapels. Carter Global. Everyone in commercial aviation knew that mark. Melissa knew it too. She had seen the memo that morning. Or rather, she had deleted it without reading past the subject line. New ownership transition. Immediate leadership audit. Jonathan raised one hand without looking away from Ava. Cut her loose. One of his guards stepped forward with a compact trauma kit. Another knelt beside the chair and spoke gently. Miss Carter, I am going to support your arm. Try not to move. Officer Cole Ramsey pushed himself upright from where Jonathan's security had forced him down moments earlier. His face was red, his uniform twisted, and humiliation made him reckless. You people cannot interfere with the lawful detention. Jonathan finally looked at him. There was no anger on his face now, only assessment. A lawful detention of an 18-year-old passenger with a valid boarding pass? Cole swallowed. She resisted removal. Tyler Brooks, the younger officer, stood a few feet away, his hands shaking. He looked at Ava's wrists and then at Cole. She was not resisting. The words came out low. Cole snapped his head toward him. Shut up. Tyler did not shut up. You pulled her out before checking her ticket. I saw it. She asked you to check the manifest. The gate went still again. Melissa's fingers tightened around the clipboard. Jonathan looked back to Ava as the guard slid a cutter beneath the plastic restraint. The blade moved slowly, carefully. The zip tie snapped. Ava cried out, not because the cutting hurt, because blood rushed back into fingers that had gone numb. Her body shook hard. Jonathan caught her shoulders before she folded forward. Breathe, sweetheart. Just breathe. I cannot feel my hands. I know. I cannot feel them. I know, baby. His voice was soft now, almost a whisper. It carried more pain than all the shouting in the terminal. A Port Authority officer arrived first, then another, then three more. Their radios crackled. Shoes hit the polished floor. Gate agents stepped back from their counters, unsure whose authority mattered most. The senior officer, a woman named Captain Denise Howard, slowed as she took in the scene. A young woman bleeding, private security forming a loose perimeter, an airport contractor restrained on the ground, a flight attendant white as paper, and Jonathan Carter kneeling beside his daughter. Captain Howard knew the name. Most people in New York business did. Carter Global handled aviation logistics, fuel contracts, aircraft maintenance software, and ground operation partnerships across several major airports. Jonathan was not a celebrity CEO. He was worse for the people in that room. He was infrastructure. Mr. Carter, Captain Howard said carefully, I need to understand what happened here. Jonathan did not stand. Asked him. He nodded toward Tyler. Captain Howard turned. Tyler's throat moved. The passenger was seated in first class, seat 1A. The lead flight attendant said she was trespassing. Mrs. Whitmore claimed the seat was hers. Officer Ramsey removed the passenger without checking the manifest. That is not true, Melissa said quickly. Tyler looked at her. His eyes were wet now, not with fear, but shame. You told me not to call medical until after departure. Melissa stared at him. The sentence landed in the terminal like a dropped glass. Captain Howard's expression changed. You delayed medical attention to avoid a flight delay? Melissa shook her head. No, that is not what I meant. I was following crew protocol. We had a possible security issue. The passenger was aggressive. Ava lifted her head. Her voice was weak. I never touched anyone. Jonathan closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, something had settled inside him. Not rage, decision. Captain Howard, he said, my daughter needs paramedics now. She also needs this area preserved. Every camera, every body cam, every phone video, every gate recording. No one deletes anything. Howard nodded to one of her officers. Secure the footage. Melissa took a step back. Mr. Carter, I am so sorry if there was a misunderstanding. Jonathan stood slowly. The movement made everyone around him straighten. A misunderstanding? His voice was calm. That was what made it dangerous. You saw a young black woman in a hoodie and decided she was a problem before you knew her name. Melissa's eyes filled with panic. That is not fair. No, Jonathan said. What happened to her is not fair. What you are feeling right now is consequence. From the jet bridge, Victoria Whitmore appeared, drawn by the delay and the strange silence. She still held her champagne glass. Her pearl bracelet flashed under the fluorescent lights. Melissa, what is taking so long? We have a schedule. Then she saw Ava, then Jonathan. Her face tightened with annoyance before fear had time to reach it. Is this her father? Jonathan turned. Victoria lifted her chin, relying on a lifetime of rooms bending around her. Sir, your daughter caused a scene. I am sorry, she was embarrassed. But these things happen when people try to sit where they do not belong. Ava flinched. Jonathan saw it. Every person at the gate saw it. Captain Howard took one step closer to Victoria. Mom, I need you to stop talking. Victoria blinked. Excuse me? Jonathan's voice cut through hers. Where she belongs. Victoria looked around, searching for support. The older couple near the boarding lane looked away. The man from seat 2B stared at the floor. Nobody came to save her from her own words. She was in my seat, Victoria said, but the confidence was leaking out now. Jonathan reached into his coat and pulled out his phone. He tapped once and turned the screen toward Captain Howard. My office just pulled the reservation record. Seat 1A, Ava Carter, purchased 3 weeks ago. Confirmed, scanned at the gate. Captain Howard read it. Then she looked at Melissa. The flight attendant's knees seemed to soften. Jonathan continued. Victoria Whitmore was assigned seat 1B, not 1A. She lied. Your crew believed her. Your contractor used force. And my daughter bled while you protected an on-time departure. No one spoke. Not even Victoria. For the first time, she looked at Ava as if she could actually see her. Not a hoodie, not a problem. A person. A young woman with tears on her face and blood on her sleeves. The paramedics arrived at a run. One knelt beside Ava, speaking gently as he wrapped gauze around her wrist. Another checked her pulse and pupils.
Can you move your fingers for me?
Ava tried. Her fingers barely twitched. Jonathan watched the paramedic's face. He did not miss the concern that passed between them. We need to transport her, the paramedic said. Jonathan nodded, but Ava grabbed his sleeve with what strength she had left. Do not leave me. The words were small, childlike. Jonathan bent down, pressing his forehead lightly to hers. I am not leaving you. I am right here. For a brief second, the whole story became smaller. Not an airline scandal, not a corporate crisis. Just a father and his daughter on a dirty airport floor, trying to breathe through something that should never have happened. Then the loudspeaker crackled. Final boarding for Flight 9002 to London. Jonathan stood. No. The gate agent froze at the counter. Jonathan turned toward the aircraft door. That flight is not leaving. Melissa whispered, you cannot do that. Jonathan looked at her. I can. Then he looked at Captain Howard. And I will do it legally. Captain, I am requesting this aircraft be held as part of an active investigation into assault, false reporting, and denial of medical care to a passenger. Captain Howard held his gaze. Then she turned to her officers. Hold the flight. Nobody boards. Nobody deplanes until statements are taken. Inside the jet bridge, the aircraft lights glowed warm and golden. Inside the cabin, passengers waited in leather seats, annoyed by a delay they did not yet understand. At the gate, Ava was lifted onto a stretcher. As they rode her past Melissa, Ava did not speak. She only looked at her. That look did more damage than anger. It said you had a choice. And you chose wrong. The rain hit the ambulance roof in hard, uneven bursts as it pulled away from Terminal 4. Inside, the world narrowed to fluorescent light, antiseptic smell, and the sound of Ava trying not to cry. A paramedic named Luis sat beside her, carefully wrapping fresh gauze around her wrists while another monitored her pulse. The ambulance rocked gently through airport traffic, sirens low but urgent. Jonathan Carter sat directly across from his daughter, still, silent. His coat was folded beside him now. Blood stained the cuff of his white dress shirt where he had held Ava's wrists at the gate. He had not noticed it yet. Or maybe he had. Maybe he just did not care. Luis adjusted the compression bandage and glanced up carefully.
Can you feel this?
He touched the tip of Ava's index finger. Ava swallowed, barely. Luis exchanged a quick look with his partner. It lasted less than a second. Jonathan still caught it. His jaw tightened. Ava watched him, watching them. Dad. He looked at her instantly. You do not have to destroy everybody because of this. Luis stopped moving for a moment. Jonathan leaned forward slowly. Destroying people is easy, Ava. His voice stayed calm. The hard part is making sure this never happens again to someone else. Ava looked away toward the rain-covered windows. Outside, planes taxied through the storm, like giant shadows moving across wet concrete. Back at JFK, Flight 9002 sat frozen at the gate. Passengers had stopped complaining about the delay. Now they were whispering. Phones glowed across the first-class cabin. Screens refreshed every few seconds as rumors spread faster than official announcements. A businessman near row 2 looked up from his tablet. Oh my God. The older woman beside him frowned.
What?
He turned the screen toward her. The headline was already live. Teenage passenger bloodied during removal from New York flight. Another article appeared seconds later. Carter Global CEO intervenes after daughter detained at JFK. Across the aisle, Victoria Whitmore's face drained of color. No, she grabbed her own phone with trembling fingers. The image on social media showed Ava chained to the airport chair, head lowered, wrists bleeding through white gauze, Jonathan kneeling beside her. The photo looked less like an airport incident and more like something pulled from a civil rights documentary. Victoria's breathing quickened. Melissa Grant stood near the galley, pretending to organize beverage carts. Her hands shook so badly she dropped out a stack of plastic cups onto the floor. Nobody helped her pick them up. Captain Eric Dalton emerged from the cockpit, closing the door behind him. Mid-50s, former Air Force, 27 years flying commercial routes, calm under pressure. Usually, not tonight. He walked toward Melissa in controlled strides. Tell me exactly what happened. Melissa lowered her voice immediately. Sir, we had a disruptive passenger refusing crew instruction. Do not give me policy language right now. His tone cut clean through hers. What happened? Melissa hesitated. That hesitation told him more than her words ever could. Captain Dalton looked around the cabin. The passengers were watching openly now, some filming, some angry, some ashamed. The man from seat 2B stood up slowly. Captain, with respect, the girl was not disruptive. She kept asking them to check the manifest. Another passenger nodded. She never yelled. An older black woman near row 4 spoke next. Your crew treated that child like she was dangerous before she even opened her mouth. Melissa's face reddened. Captain Dalton felt the pressure building behind his eyes. He had seen mistakes before, bad calls, overreactions. But this felt different. This felt national. Then his phone vibrated. Operations. He answered immediately, Dalton speaking. The voice on the other end was clipped and tense. Captain, your aircraft is grounded pending investigation. FAA and Port Authority involved. Corporate legal is requesting full crew cooperation. Dalton closed his eyes briefly. Understood, the voice continued. And Eric.
Yes!
Jonathan Carter personally requested all cockpit recordings preserved. The captain looked slowly toward Melissa. When he hung up, the silence around him felt heavy enough to bend steel.
What did you do?
Melissa's lips trembled. I followed protocol. No, Dalton said quietly. Protocol starts with identifying the passenger correctly. Victoria suddenly stood from seat 1B. This is absurd. My husband sits on the Senate Transportation Committee. I am not staying trapped on this plane because some teenager made accusations. Several passengers turned toward her at once. The older black woman laughed once. Cold. Lady, she was bleeding. Victoria stiffened. I did not touch her. No, the woman replied. You just watched. That landed harder. Victoria grabbed her handbag. I want to leave. Captain Dalton stepped into the aisle. Nobody leaves until Port Authority finishes taking statements. Victoria stared at him in disbelief. You cannot detain me. No, Mom, Dalton said, but the airport police can. For the first time that night, fear entered her eyes fully. At Mount Sinai Hospital in Manhattan, doctors moved Ava through a maze of white hallways under bright surgical lights. Nurses cut away the blood-stained sleeves of her hoodie carefully to avoid touching the swelling around her wrists. Jonathan walked beside the stretcher without speaking. Hospital staff recognized him almost immediately, not because he was famous, because powerful people move differently in crisis. Quietly, directly, surrounded by urgency. A surgeon named Dr. Rachel Bennett met them outside imaging, late 40s, sharp eyes, no wasted words. I need everyone except the patient outside for scans. Jonathan stopped. I am staying. Dr. Bennett held his gaze. I understand you are her father, but right now I need room to work. Ava looked up weakly. Dad, it is okay. Jonathan hesitated. That was rare for him. People in business liked to say Jonathan Carter controlled every room he entered, but hospitals reminded powerful people of the truth. Money can buy access. It cannot guarantee outcomes. He stepped back finally.
Call me the second you know anything.
Dr. Bennett nodded once and disappeared behind the swinging doors with Ava. Jonathan remained standing in the hallway. Rainwater still darkened the shoulders of his coat, blood-stained one cuff. His phone buzzed constantly in his pocket. Board members, news networks, lawyers, politicians. He ignored all of them. Across the hallway, a janitor slowly pushed a mop bucket past the waiting area. He glanced at Jonathan twice before stopping awkwardly.
Mr. Carter?
Jonathan looked up. The man swallowed hard.
My daughter is 16.
Jonathan said nothing. The janitor nodded toward the surgical doors. What happened to your girl? That should never happen to anybody's child. Jonathan's face shifted for the first time all night. Not anger, not power, pain. The janitor continued quietly. Sometimes people look at our kids and decide who they are before they ever speak. That is the disease. Not race alone, not money alone. It is deciding somebody is less human before you know their name. Jonathan stared at him. The man gave a small nod and pushed the mop bucket away down the hallway. Jonathan watched him go. Then he sat down for the first time in hours. Alone in the hard plastic hospital chair, he finally allowed himself one dangerous thought. He had almost lost her. Not to a crash, not to a criminal, not to some unavoidable tragedy, to arrogance, to assumptions, to people who stopped seeing humanity the moment they saw a hoodie and dark skin. His phone buzzed again. This time he answered. It was Olivia Green, Chief Legal Counsel for Carter Global. Jonathan. Her voice was steady. We have identified everyone involved, the airline contractor, the crew, the passenger. Their attorneys are already calling. Jonathan leaned back slowly. Good. Olivia paused. There is something else. The footage leaked. How bad? Silence. Then Olivia answered softly. Bad enough that the country is about to have a very uncomfortable conversation. By midnight, the video had reached more people than the airline's official apology ever could. It was everywhere. On local news, on national news, on phones held by tired nurses during break, on tablets in retirement homes, on televisions in airport bars from Atlanta to Seattle. Ava Carter's face was not clear in every clip, but her pain was. The way her head dipped, the way her shoulders trembled, the way blood ran from her wrists while adults stood around deciding whether her suffering was inconvenient. That was the part people could not stop watching. At JFK Terminal 4 had become a storm center. Reporters gathered outside the glass doors with cameras balanced on shoulders and microphones raised like weapons. Airport police moved in and out of restricted corridors. Airline employees whispered in break rooms. Some cried, some deleted old texts, some called union representatives. Inside a conference room behind the gate offices, Melissa Grant sat at a long table with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. Captain Denise Howard stood near the wall. Her badge caught the harsh ceiling light. A Port Authority investigator placed a recorder on the table and pressed the button. State your name for the record. Melissa swallowed. Melissa Ann Grant. Your position. Lead flight attendant. Transatlantic Airlines. The investigator looked down at a printed timeline. At approximately 7:43 in the evening, you requested security assistance for a passenger in seat 1A. Is that correct? Yes. What was the passenger doing at that time? Melissa hesitated. She was refusing crew instructions. The investigator lifted his eyes. What instruction? To vacate the seat. Why? Melissa's mouth opened, then closed. because there was a seat assignment issue. The investigator slid a paper across the table. The manifest shows Ava Carter assigned to seat 1A, Victoria Whitmore assigned to seat 1B. There was no seat assignment issue. Melissa stared at the paper. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. Captain Howard stepped forward. "Miss Grant, this is your chance to be honest." Melissa's breathing turned shallow. "I believe Mrs. Whitmore." "Why?" The question sat there. Simple, unavoidable. Melissa looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, blue lights flashed against the wet tarmac. She wanted to say pressure, schedule, passenger status, confusion, but underneath all of that was something uglier, something she had spent years calling instinct. She finally whispered, "Because she looked like she belonged there, and Ava Carter did not?" Melissa closed her eyes. No answer was needed. Down the hall, Tyler Brooks sat alone on a bench with his elbows on his knees. His uniform shirt was untucked. His face looked older than it had that morning. Cole Ramsey had been escorted out in handcuffs after giving 3 different versions of the same event. First, Ava had lunged. Then she had shoved. Then she had resisted by refusing to stand fast enough. The cameras told a different story. So did Tyler. He had spoken. Too late to save Ava from pain, but not too late to stop the lie from becoming truth. Still, guilt sat on him like wet concrete. Captain Howard found him there after midnight. "You did the right thing in that room," she said. Tyler shook his head. "No, Mom. I did the least wrong thing after doing nothing." Howard sat beside him, leaving space between them. "That is a hard sentence to live with." He rubbed both hands over his face. "I saw it happening. I knew it felt wrong. But Cole was senior. Melissa sounded sure. Mrs. Whitmore sounded powerful. And the girl was so calm, I told myself maybe I was missing something." He looked at Howard. "I was not missing something. I was afraid." Howard nodded slowly. "Most harm does not happen because every person in the room is cruel. It happens because decent people get quiet at the wrong moment." Tyler stared at the floor. "Will she be okay?" Howard did not answer right away. "I do not know." At Mount Sinai, Jonathan Carter stood behind a glass wall, watching Dr. Rachel Bennett examine Ava's hands. Ava sat on the edge of the hospital bed. Her hoodie had been replaced with a soft blue gown. Her curls were loose now, falling around her face. Bandages wrapped both wrists. Her fingers trembled when she tried to spread them. Dr. Bennett's voice stayed gentle. "Try to touch your thumb to each finger." Ava tried. Index, middle, ring, then the little finger. Her right hand shook and stopped halfway. Ava pressed her lips together. "Again," she whispered. Dr. Bennett lowered her hand. "Not yet." "Again, Ava," I said again. Jonathan saw the fight in her face, the rage beneath the fear. The desperate need to prove her body had not betrayed her. Dr. Bennett sat beside her. "Listen to me. Healing is not surrender. Rest is not weakness. Your hands have been through trauma. So has the rest of you." Ava looked down. "I have a tournament in London."
Your tournament can wait.
"No," Ava said. "People like that woman do not get to be the reason I disappear." Dr. Bennett softened. "Then do not disappear. But do not confuse punishment with recovery. You do not owe the world proof tonight." Ava blinked. That sentence reached somewhere deeper than medicine. Jonathan stepped into the room. Ava looked at him. "Did they arrest her?" Jonathan knew who she meant. Victoria Whitmore had been detained for questioning, not formally arrested yet. Her husband's office had already released a statement calling the incident unfortunate and politically motivated. Lawyers were moving. Pressure was building. Influence was doing what influence always did, trying to turn accountability into inconvenience. "Not yet," Jonathan said. Ava's face tightened, so she walks away. "No." His voice was quiet. "She does not walk away." He pulled a chair close to her bed and sat down. For once, he did not sound like a CEO. He sounded like a father choosing every word carefully. "But I need you to hear me. Justice cannot just be revenge with better lawyers. If we do this wrong, the story becomes about our power, not about what happened, not about what needs to change." Ava looked at him, confused and hurt. "She hurt me. I know. They all did. I know. Then why do I have to be better?" Jonathan's eyes shone, but his voice held. "Because better does not mean soft. Better means exact. Better means we tell the truth so clearly that nobody can hide behind status, policy, or fear." Ava turned her bandaged hands over in her lap. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Outside the room, Olivia Green arrived with 2 phones, a legal folder, and a face that carried the weight of disaster management. Jonathan stood.
Tell me.
Olivia glanced at Ava, then back at him. The airline board is requesting an emergency call. The Department of Transportation has opened an inquiry. The contractor has suspended Cole Ramsey. Melissa Grant has been placed on leave. Captain Dalton and the crew are being interviewed. And Victoria? Olivia's jaw tightened. Senator Whitmore's office is trying to frame this as a misunderstanding involving an emotional minor. Ava looked up sharply. Emotional minor? Jonathan went very still. Olivia continued. They are saying Ava refused to identify herself and created confusion. Ava's breathing changed. The heart monitor ticked faster. Jonathan turned toward her. Ava, look at me. But she was not looking at him. She was back in the cabin, back under the lights, back in the chair, back in the moment when adults turned her into a threat because it was easier than admitting they were wrong. She whispered, they are still doing it. Jonathan took her hand carefully, avoiding the bandages. Then we answer. Olivia lowered her voice. How? Jonathan looked at Ava, not with anger, with evidence. Ava lifted her eyes. Her pain was still there, so was something else. Clarity. She nodded once. Release the footage, she said. All of it. Let them see exactly how calm I was. Let them see who lied. Let them see who watched. Jonathan studied his daughter for a long breath.
Are you sure?
Ava's voice did not shake this time.
Yes.
By morning, America would see the whole truth. Not a rumor, not a headline, not a polished statement written by people in expensive rooms. The truth, frame by frame. And once the country saw it, no one would be able to call Ava Carter invisible again. At 6:15 the next morning, America watched Ava Carter bleed in high definition. The footage opened without music, no dramatic edits, no narration. Just fluorescent airport light and the shaky camera angle of a passenger standing near the boarding lane. Ava sat quietly in seat 1A, with her hoodie pulled over her curls and her backpack against her leg. She looked exhausted, young, harmless. Then Victoria Whitmore's voice cut through the cabin. You are in my seat. Millions of people watched what happened next in silence. They watched Ava stay calm. They watched her offer her boarding pass. They watched Melissa Grant dismiss it without checking. They watched assumptions turn into accusations in real time. And then came the part nobody could explain away. The fall, the zip ties, the blood. By sunrise, every major network in the country was running the clip. On one split screen, commentators debated airline procedure. On another, Ava's face froze mid-flinch as Officer Cole Ramsey shoved her into the cabin wall. The public reaction was immediate, not divided, not confused. Furious. At a diner outside Pittsburgh, retired truck driver Leonard Hayes pushed his coffee aside and stared at the television above the counter. That girl never raised her voice once. The waitress beside him shook her head slowly. My grandson wears hoodies like that every day. In Phoenix, a retired Air Force pilot called into a morning radio show. I flew aircraft for 30 years. We were trained to de-escalate. What happened there was not safety. It was prejudice dressed up as procedure. By 8 o'clock, transatlantic airline stock had dropped almost 13%. By 9, advertisers began pulling campaign partnerships. By 10, senators who had spent years smiling beside Richard Whitmore suddenly stopped answering his calls. At Mount Sinai Hospital, Ava sat upright in bed with the television muted. She did not need sound anymore. She already knew every frame. Jonathan stood near the window speaking quietly with Olivia Green while rain slid down the glass behind them. How bad? Olivia held a tablet against her chest. Worse than we expected, better than we hoped. Jonathan looked at her. People are not just reacting to Ava, Olivia said. They are reacting to recognition. Everyone sees somebody in that video. Their daughter, their grandson, the kid who gets judged before speaking. Ava lowered her eyes, Jonathan noticed. He crossed the room slowly and sat beside her. You okay? She gave a tiny shrug. I did not know I looked that scared. You were scared. I hate that everybody saw it. Jonathan leaned back in the chair. No, he spoke carefully now. You hate that they caused it. There is a difference. Ava looked at her wrapped wrists. People online keep calling me brave. Jonathan followed her gaze. You do not have to feel brave to survive something. Before Ava could answer, someone knocked lightly on the door. Dr. Rachel Bennett stepped in holding a scan folder. Her expression was professional, but softer than yesterday. How are the hands this morning? Ava tried flexing her fingers, still numb in places. Dr. Bennett nodded. That is expected. The swelling needs time to go down before we know the full extent of nerve damage. Jonathan stood immediately. What are we talking about long term? Dr. Bennett chose her words carefully. Best case, she regains full function with therapy. Worst case, the doctor paused Liz. Fine motor movement may never completely return. The room went still. Ava's breathing changed first. Then Jonathan's. Chess. The word hung there even before anyone said it aloud. Dr. Bennett looked toward Ava gently. Your father told me you compete. Ava gave a small nod. National speed tournaments. The doctor sat down across from her. Then listen to me carefully. Your hands are injured, but your life is not over. Athletes recover, musicians recover, people rebuild. Trauma feels permanent while you are inside it. Ava swallowed hard. What if I cannot play the same way again? Dr. Bennett held her gaze. Then you learn who you are besides the game. That answer hurt, because it was honest. Across Manhattan, Victoria Whitmore sat inside her lawyer's office watching her life collapse one headline at a time. The office television played silently while staff members rushed in and out carrying folders and phones. Victoria looked nothing like the woman from first class anymore. Her makeup had smeared overnight. Her silver hair hung loose around her face. She had not slept. Attorney Martin Feldman paced near the desk. You cannot speak publicly again without me present. Victoria snapped back immediately. I was trying to explain myself. You called an inner teenager unstable on live television. Victoria pressed trembling fingers against her temple. I panicked. Martin stopped pacing. Do you understand how bad this is? She looked up sharply. That girl's father's turning this into a circus. No, Martin said quietly. The video did that. Victoria's face tightened. She should have just moved seats. The room fell silent. Martin stared at her for a long moment. Then he slowly sat down across from her. Victoria, listen to yourself. She looked away. For the first time in her life, shame started breaking through the armor of entitlement. Not because she suddenly became compassionate, because consequences had finally entered the room. At Transatlantic headquarters in Chicago, executives packed into an emergency board meeting, while financial analysts updated loss projections every 15 minutes. Screens around the conference room displayed the same image again and again. Ava Carter bleeding beside gate B42. CEO Thomas Reed loosened his tie with shaking fingers. How exposed are we? The general counsel answered immediately. Potential civil liability is massive, but the reputational damage may be worse. One board member slammed a folder shut. Why did nobody stop this before it exploded? Nobody answered. Because everyone knew the truth. People had seen warning signs for years. Complaints dismissed. Passengers profiled. Employees protected because they generated revenue or avoided delays. A culture of quiet shortcuts. And quiet shortcuts become public disasters eventually. Thomas Reed looked toward the head of Human Resources. Melissa Grant? Terminated this morning. Cole Ramsey? Under criminal investigation. Victoria Whitmore? Her husband just resigned from the Transportation Oversight Committee. Silence spread around the room. Then another executive spoke softly.
And Jonathan Carter?
Thomas Reed exhaled slowly. He requested a direct meeting. Every face in the room changed. Because Jonathan Carter was not simply an angry parent anymore. He was now the most dangerous kind of man in America. A powerful man with public sympathy. Back at the hospital, Ava sat alone for the first time all day while Jonathan took a call outside. The room was quiet except for the heart monitor and distant hallway noise. Her phone buzzed on the bedside table. Thousands of messages, some angry, some supportive. One stood out. It came from Tyler Brooks, the young officer. I should have stopped him sooner. I am sorry. Ava stared at the message, then typed slowly with stiff fingers. You told the truth when it mattered. The reply came quickly. Not soon enough. Ava looked at her bandaged hands. Neither of us can change that now. She almost sent it, then deleted it. Instead, she wrote something simpler. Do better next time somebody needs help. 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then appeared again.
I will.
Ava placed the phone down gently. Outside her room, Jonathan stood at the hallway window speaking to Olivia. You know this is bigger than the lawsuit now, Olivia said quietly. Jonathan nodded once. I know. People are angry. They should be. Olivia looked through the glass at Ava, sitting alone on the hospital bed. What do you want from all this? Jonathan did not answer immediately. The city stretched outside the hospital windows. Gray sky, wet streets, morning traffic crawling through Manhattan. Finally, he spoke. I want the next girl in a hoodie to make it onto her flight without having to prove she deserves humanity first. Jonathan Carter entered the transatlantic boardroom at 11:30 in the morning, and every conversation died before the door finished closing. The room overlooked downtown Chicago from the 42nd floor. Gray clouds pressed against the glass. Lake Michigan stretched beyond the skyline, cold and flat under the winter light. Around the table sat people who had spent their entire careers managing storms from behind polished wood and careful language. This storm had a name, Ava. Jonathan did not sit at first. He placed a thin black folder on the table and looked at each face slowly. Thomas Reed, the airline CEO, stood with both hands clasped in front of him. Mr. Carter, thank you for coming. Before we begin, let me say personally how sorry we are for what happened to your daughter. Jonathan looked at him. Are you sorry it happened, or sorry people saw it? The question stopped the room cold. Thomas swallowed. Both. At least that was honest. Jonathan pulled out a chair and sat down. Olivia Green sat to his right. Her tablet was already open. Across from them, Transatlantic's lawyers had 3 laptops, 2 pitchers of water, and the tired faces of people who knew there was no clean way out. Thomas tried again. We are prepared to offer a full public apology. We will cover all medical expenses, of course. We will establish a passenger dignity task force, and we are ready to discuss a significant settlement. Jonathan leaned back. A task force. Thomas shifted, an independent one. Jonathan tapped the folder once. My daughter was restrained until her wrists bled because your employees chose comfort over truth. Do not insult her with a committee title. The head of human resources, a woman named Carol Benton, leaned forward carefully. Mr. Carter, I understand your anger, but Melissa Grant acted outside our values. Jonathan turned to her.
Did she?
Carol blinked. Excuse me? He opened the folder and slid several pages across the table. These are complaints filed against Melissa Grant over the last 7 years. Different passengers, similar language, asked for extra identification, assumed seat fraud, refused service, escalated to security. Most complaints were closed as misunderstanding. Carol looked down. Her face changed before she spoke. I have not seen these. Jonathan's voice stayed level. That is the problem. Thomas turned sharply toward his legal counsel.
Are these real?
Olivia answered before anyone else could. They came from your own customer relations archive. Our forensic team pulled them last night after your system access was granted under the merger transition agreement. One lawyer lowered his eyes. The silence grew teeth. Jonathan continued. A bad employee is a personnel issue. A buried pattern is a culture issue. Carol's fingers trembled slightly as she turned another page. A retired school teacher from Detroit. A pastor from Atlanta, a grandmother traveling with her grandson from Charlotte, a disabled veteran from Baltimore. None of them had Jonathan Carter for a father. None of them made national news. So nothing changed. That was the part the room could not defend. Thomas sat down slowly. What do you want? Jonathan did not answer right away. He looked out at the lake. In business, people expected him to want money, control, public victory, a resignation he could hold up like a trophy. But all morning, Ava's words had followed him. If I was anyone else's daughter, they would have gotten away with it. He turned back to the table. I want a binding consent agreement. The lawyers looked up. Olivia slid a document forward. Effective immediately, Transatlantic will adopt a passenger civil rights protocol across all domestic and international routes. No passenger can be removed over a seating dispute until a supervisor verifies the manifest, the boarding record, and the passenger's identification through documented procedure. Thomas listened, pale. Jonathan continued. All removals must be body camera recorded by airport security or documented by gate cameras. Any medical complaint during a removal triggers mandatory EMS before departure clearance. No exceptions for schedule pressure. Carol nodded slowly now. That should already be standard. It should, Jonathan said. Olivia added, there will also be an outside view of 5 years of discrimination complaints, overseen by a retired federal judge. One board member, older, silver-haired, raised his hand slightly. Mr. Carter, with respect, that will open us to enormous liability. Jonathan looked at him.
Yes.
The man stopped. Jonathan leaned forward. You are not here to avoid liability. You are here because liability is what finally made you pay attention.
No one spoke.
Then Thomas asked the question they had all been afraid to ask. And if we refuse, Jonathan's expression did not change. Carter Global pauses integration. We withdraw ground system support from the merger. I recommend to the board that the transatlantic brand be dissolved over the next quarter and folded into a new operating structure. Your shareholders can read why in the filing. A lawyer whispered, that would destroy us. Jonathan nodded once. Yes, it was not a threat, it was a door. On the other side of Chicago, Melissa Grant sat in her kitchen with the blinds half closed. Her husband had taken the children to his sister's house before sunrise. Reporters had found their street. Neighbors had stopped, pretending they were not looking through windows. On the table in front of her sat a printed copy of her termination notice. Beside it, her phone glowed with hundreds of messages, some vicious, some deserved, some from old coworkers telling her not to say anything until the union lawyer arrived. Melissa had spent 23 years in the air. She knew meal codes, equipment delays, passenger anxiety, medical emergencies, drunk businessmen, crying babies, grieving widows flying to funerals. She had once believed she was good at reading people. That belief had become a weapon. Her doorbell rang. She froze. It rang again. Slowly, she walked to the door and looked through the peephole. Tyler Brooks stood on the porch with his hands in his coat pockets. Melissa opened the door only a few inches.
What are you doing here?
Tyler's eyes were red from lack of sleep. I need you to tell the truth. Melissa laughed once, bitter and small. You already did that for both of us. No. He shook his head. I told what I saw. You need to tell why it happened. Her face hardened. Get off my porch. Tyler did not move. She is 18. Her hands may never fully heal. You cannot hide behind protocol forever. Melissa's eyes filled suddenly. You think I do not know that? Then say it. She stared at him through the crack in the door.
Say what?
Tyler's voice broke. Say you saw a black girl in a hoodie and decided Mrs. Whitmore mattered more. Melissa's mouth trembled. For a second, Tyler thought she would slam the door. Instead, she let go of the handle. The door opened wider. Inside, her kitchen looked painfully ordinary. Coffee mugs in the sink, a school calendar on the fridge, a family photo beside a bowl of oranges. That ordinariness made the harm worse somehow. Because cruelty did not always live in monsters. Sometimes it lived in regular people who had never questioned the shortcuts in their own minds. Melissa sat down at the kitchen table. I was tired, she whispered. Tyler stood across from her. That is not enough, I know. She wiped her face. I saw what Victoria wanted me to see. That is closer. Melissa looked up at him. I was wrong. The words were small, not enough, but real. Back in New York, Ava sat in a rehabilitation room with her wrists wrapped and her jaw clenched. A physical therapist named Nora placed 3 wooden blocks on the table, moved them from left to right, slowly. Ava stared at the blocks like they were enemies. I can do more than this. Nora smiled gently. I believe you. But today this is the work. Ava pinched the first block between her thumb and index finger. Her hand shook. The block slipped. It hit the table with a dull wooden sound. Ava closed her eyes. Again, Nora said. Ava opened them. Again. She picked up the block. It slipped again. Her breathing sharpened. Again, Nora said. This time Ava looked at her. You are enjoying that word. Nora's smile softened. No, I respect it. Again is how people come back. Ava looked at the block, then at her hands. Then slowly, painfully, she picked it up and moved it 1 inch to the right. Not far, not graceful, but hers. In Chicago, Jonathan signed the consent agreement at the end of the boardroom table. Thomas Reed signed next. The pen scratched softly across paper, a small sound, but it carried weight. When it was done, Jonathan stood. This does not fix what happened. Thomas nodded. No, it does not. But it can't stop the next one, Jonathan said. He buttoned his coat and turned toward the door. Then Carol Benton spoke. Mr. Carter. He paused. She held up the complaint pages with visible shame. We should have listened sooner. Jonathan looked at her for a long moment. Yes, he said. Then he left them with the truth they had earned. You should have listened when the people complaining were powerless. 3 weeks after the incident, Ava Carter stepped back into an airport for the first time. The automatic doors opened with a soft mechanical sigh, and the smell hit her immediately. Coffee, jet fuel, rain on concrete. Her body reacted before her mind could. Her shoulders tightened, her breath shortened. Jonathan noticed instantly. You want to leave? Ava shook her head too fast. No, but her fingers curled against the sleeves of her coat. The scars around her wrists had faded from dark purple to thin pink lines now, still visible, still tender. She wore soft compression gloves most days to help with swelling and nerve pain. JFK looked the same as it always had, crowded, bright, indifferent. That was what unsettled her most. The world had moved on while her nervous system had not. A businessman brushed past with a rolling suitcase. Somewhere above them, a boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Ava stopped walking. Gate B42 sat at the far end of the concourse. Jonathan followed her gaze carefully. You do not have to prove anything by going there. Ava swallowed. I know, but she started walking anyway, slowly. Each step sounded louder inside her head than on the polished airport floor. People recognized her now, not everyone, but enough. A woman near a bookstore glanced twice before whispering to her husband. A TSA officer at the checkpoint straightened slightly when he saw Jonathan Carter beside her. Some faces carried sympathy, others carried discomfort. Ava hated both. She did not want pity. She wanted normal. At the gate, construction barriers blocked part of the waiting area. New cameras had been installed above the boarding lane. Signs about passenger rights and de-escalation procedures stood near the counter. Ava stared at them quietly. A middle-aged gate agent noticed her first. His name tag read Daniel Perez. The moment recognition hit his face, panic followed. Miss Carter.
Dot.
Ava looked at him. Daniel stepped out from behind the counter slowly, as if approaching a wounded animal. I just want to say, Dot, what happened here should never have happened. His voice shook slightly. Ava studied him for a second. He meant it. That mattered. But it did not erase anything. Daniel continued carefully. My daughter is 19, same age as you. He glanced toward the floor before meeting her eyes again. Watching that video made me sick. Ava nodded once. Thank you. Daniel looked relieved just to hear her speak. Then his eyes dropped to the compression gloves. How are your hands? Ava flexed her fingers out slightly. Better some days, not all days. Daniel's face tightens with genuine sadness. Jonathan watched the exchange silently. This was the part television never showed. Not lawsuits, not headlines. The quiet aftermath, the thousands of ordinary interactions after public trauma where people either restore your dignity or take another piece of it away. Daniel cleared his throat. We changed procedures after what happened. Every employee had to go through retraining. Ava looked around the gate again. New signs, new cameras, new policies. It looked cleaner now, safer. But trauma did not care about signage. A sudden burst of laughter from nearby made Ava flinch hard. Her breathing changed instantly. Jonathan stepped closer without touching her. Ava, she shook her head. I am okay. But she was not. Across the concourse, a security officer walked past wearing black restraint cuffs on his belt. Ava froze. The sound disappeared. The airport disappeared. For one terrible second, she was back on the floor of the jet bridge, her cheek against cold metal, plastic cutting skin, Melissa's voice. You should have thought about that before committing ticket fraud. Ava's knees weakened. Jonathan caught her elbow immediately. Easy. Daniel's face fell.
Miss Carter?
Ava looked down, ashamed of her own body. I need a minute. Jonathan guided her toward an empty seating area near the windows overlooking the runway. Planes moved slowly through gray afternoon rain outside. Ava sat down hard. Her breathing came fast now. Jonathan crouched beside her. Look at me, she tried. Count 5 things you can see. Dad. 5 things. Ava swallowed. The runway, that blue luggage cart. The control tower, a kid with a red backpack. Your tie. Good. 4 things you can hear. Boarding announcements, rolling suitcases, rain, your watch. Her breathing slowed a little. Jonathan stayed calm. 3 things you can touch. The chair, my gloves, your hand. Her voice cracked on the last one. Jonathan squeezed her fingers gently. That is it. Stay here. Stay now, not there. Ava closed her eyes. People nearby pretended not to stare. Some recognized her, some did not. An older black woman sitting across the waiting area watched quietly for a moment before standing and walking over. She moved slowly, leaning slightly on a cane. Mind if I sit here, baby? Ava opened her eyes and nodded. The woman sat beside her with the careful patience of someone who understood pain personally. I saw your interview last week. Ava looked embarrassed immediately. It was not really an interview. No, the woman smiled softly. It was a young girl trying to stay strong while the whole country watched. Jonathan stepped back slightly, giving space. The woman extended a hand. Loretta Gaines. Ava shook it carefully. Loretta nodded toward the terminal. I marched in Birmingham when I was younger than you. Ava blinked. Loretta's eyes drifted toward the windows. Back then, people said things were not racial, too. Said we were overreacting. Said there had been misunderstandings. Her gaze returned to Ava. Pain changes outfits over time, but it still recognizes vulnerable people when it walks into a room. Ava listened quietly. Loretta smiled again. But healing works the same way, too. One person deciding to see your humanity when the world forgets to. For the first time that day, Ava's shoulders loosened slightly. Loretta glanced at the gloves covering Ava's wrists.
You play piano? Chess?
Loretta chuckled softly, even more dangerous. Ava laughed before she could stop herself. Small, unexpected, real. Jonathan watched the sound change the entire tension in her face. Loretta stood carefully with her cane. Do not let this place become bigger than your life, sweetheart. Then she looked directly at Jonathan. And do not let power convince you revenge heals people faster than truth does. Jonathan gave a quiet nod. Loretta walked away slowly into the crowd. Ava watched her disappear between travelers and rolling luggage.
Who was she?
Jonathan looked toward the concourse, someone who already survived her own version of this country. Ava leaned back against the chair. The panic attack had passed now, leaving only exhaustion behind. She looked at gate B42 one more time. 3 weeks ago, that gate had taken something from her. Not just safety, trust. The simple belief that adults in authority sees her as a child before seeing her as a threat. That damage heals slower than nerves. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. A notification from the U.S. Chess Federation. She opened it carefully. Invitation confirmed. London International Blitz Championship. 2 months away. Jonathan saw the screen. You do not have to decide now. Ava stared at the message. The truth was simple. She was terrified. Not just of airports, of cameras, of strangers, of becoming the girl from the video forever. But another truth sat beneath that fear. If she disappeared now, then the worst moment of her life would become the final chapter. Ava locked the phone and looked out at the runway. A plane lifted through the rain in the distance, climbing slowly into heavy clouds. I am going to London, she said quietly. Jonathan studied her face. You sure? No. A small smile touched Ava's mouth. But I think courage probably feels like this before it feels inspiring. The flash of cameras started before Ava even stepped out of the car. London rain tapped softly against the black SUV as security moved ahead through the crowd outside the Langham Hotel. Reporters lined the sidewalk behind barriers, shouting questions over one another while chess fans pressed phones into the air, trying to capture a glimpse of her. Ava froze for half a second inside the open car door. Jonathan noticed immediately. You can still go through the private entrance. Ava looked through the rain-streaked window at the crowd. Some faces were curious, some supportive, some hungry. She could already hear the questions waiting for her. How are your hands? Are you traumatized? Do you think race played a role? Do you regret releasing the footage? The world loves survivors as long as survivors stayed wounded enough to inspire people. Ava hated that. She adjusted the black compression gloves beneath her coat sleeves and stepped out anyway. The cameras exploded. Ava, Miss Carter, over here.
How are you feeling? Did the airline contact you directly?
Jonathan walked beside her but slightly behind, letting her choose the pace. That mattered. He was powerful enough to silence the entire sidewalk if he wanted. But healing built from control, not protection. A reporter near the barricade raised her voice above the others. Ava, are you afraid to fly again? Ava stopped walking. Jonathan's security shifted instantly, tense and ready. But Ava turned toward the question calmly. Yes, she said. The sidewalk quieted. Ava continued. I think pretending trauma disappeared would be dishonest. The reporter lowered her microphone slightly. Ava looked around at the crowd. But fear is not the same thing as surrender. For a second, nobody shouted, nobody moved. Then the flashes started again. Inside the hotel lobby, warmth wrapped around them immediately. Gold light reflected across marble floors. Soft piano music drifted through the air from the restaurant lounge. Tournament staff hurried near registration tables covered in chessboards and sponsor banners. A tall British organizer approached quickly with nervous energy. "Miss Carter, Mr. Carter, welcome. I am Simon Fletcher, tournament director." He extended his hand carefully toward Ava first. "Not Jonathan." Ava noticed that. "Good." Simon smiled awkwardly. "We have arranged a private floor for you if needed. Additional security as well." Ava shook her head. "I do not want special treatment." Simon hesitated. "Of course, it is just." There has been quite a lot of media attention. Jonathan looked around the lobby. Several players were already staring. Some recognized Ava from chess, others from the airport video. One teenager whispered to his coach while pretending not to look directly at her. Ava knew that look now. Recognition mixed with discomfort. Simon cleared his throat. "Your opening match begins tomorrow afternoon." Ava nodded. "Thank you." As they headed toward the elevators, a familiar voice stopped her. "You actually came." Ava turned. Ethan Cole stood near the registration desk holding a coffee cup and a chess case over one shoulder. 19 years old, national champion, sharp jawline, sharp tongue. He had beaten Ava twice before the incident and lost her 3 times after that. Their rivalry had followed them through junior tournaments for years. Ethan glanced toward her gloves.
I thought you might withdraw.
Jonathan stiffened slightly beside her. Ava answered before he could speak. "I thought about it." Ethan studied her face for a moment. Then he nodded once. "Good." That surprised her. Ethan took a sip of coffee. "Most people here are terrified of playing you right now. Why? Because if they beat you, they look cruel. If they lose, they become part of your comeback story." Ava almost smiled. "That sounds cynical." Ethan shrugged. "Chess players are cynical. It is basically our cardio." Jonathan let out the faintest breath of amusement. Ethan looked toward him respectfully. "Sir." Jonathan nodded once. Ethan turned back to Ava. "You still hate the Sicilian defense?" Ava answered automatically. "Only when people play it badly." Good. For the first time since arriving in London, something inside her loosened. Not because Ethan was kind. Because he treated her like a competitor before treating her like a headline. That mattered more than sympathy. The next morning, the tournament hall buzzed with low conversation and the sound of chess clocks clicking across dozens of tables. Cameras lined the back walls. Spectators filled the viewing balcony. Ava sat alone near a window before her first match, staring down at her hands. The tremor was small today, but present. Her physical therapist back in New York had warned her about this. Stress amplifies nerve instability, and nothing created stress like being watched by the world. A chair scraped softly across from her. Jonathan sat down holding 2 cups of tea, one with sugar, one without. He handed her the sweet one automatically. Ava smiled faintly. "You remembered. I remember everything about you." The words landed gently. Jonathan watched her flex her fingers under the table. "You do not have to win this tournament for your story to matter." Ava stared into the tea. "I know. Do you?" She looked up slowly. Jonathan's expression stayed calm, but his eyes carried concern. "You survived something terrible. That was never supposed to become a performance requirement." Ava leaned back in the chair. "People keep acting like I am supposed to inspire them now." Jonathan nodded slightly. "That is what people do when they do not know how to sit with injustice. They try to turn survivors into lessons so they can feel safer." Ava looked across the hall at the rows of chessboards. "I just want one place where nobody looks at me like that girl from the airport." Jonathan followed her gaze. "Then make this place about chess again." The loudspeaker announced first-round pairings. Ava Carter versus Victor Petrov. A ripple moved through the room immediately. Phones appeared. Whispers spread. Ava stood slowly. Her stomach tightened as she walked toward the board. Every camera seemed louder now. Every footstep sharper. Across from her, Victor Petrov rose politely from his chair, mid-20s. Russian grandmaster, serious eyes, calm posture. He extended his hand. "Miss Carter." Ava shook it carefully. Victor glanced briefly at her gloves.
Then never mention them.
Thank you, Ava thought silently. The match began. Clock pressed. Pieces moved. The world narrowed. Not completely. The trauma still sat inside her body like an alarm waiting for permission to ring. But chess helped. Chess had rules. Structure, logic. No hidden intentions. No profiling. No assumptions. Just choices and consequences. 20 minutes into the match, Ava reached for a knight, and her fingers slipped. The piece toppled sideways against the board. A murmur passed through the audience. Ava's chest tightened instantly. Heat climbed her neck. Victor looked up. "Take your time," he said quietly. The tournament camera zoomed closer. Ava could feel it, thou watching, the waiting. Her hand trembled harder now. Across the room, Jonathan remained perfectly still, not rushing toward her, not rescuing her, trusting her. Ava inhaled once, slow, then again. She reset the night carefully and continued the game, move by move, breath by breath. 40 minutes later, Victor leaned back in his chair, studying the board with narrowed eyes. Then finally, reluctantly, he tipped his king over. Resignation. The room erupted into applause. Not explosive, respectful. Ava sat there for a second without moving, almost disbelieving. Then she looked down at her own hands resting on the table, still shaking, still healing, still hers. As spectators crowded around the board, Victor stood beside her. "You know why people are really watching you?" Ava looked up. He nodded toward the board. "Not because you got hurt. Because most people never come back after something breaks them publicly." He extended his hand again. "You did." Ava shook it. This time, her grip held steady. By the fourth day of the tournament, people stopped talking about the airport first. They started talking about Ava's chess. That mattered more than anyone realized. Inside the London International Blitz Championship Hall, the atmosphere had shifted. At the beginning of the week, reporters waited for emotional statements. They wanted trembling voices and dramatic sound bites. They wanted the wounded girl from the viral video. Now they stood crowded around analysis boards, arguing over Ava Carter's in-game strategy against Viktor Petrov. That was different. That was respect. Ava sat alone near the practice tables, reviewing openings on a digital board while rain streaked softly against the tall hotel windows. Her gloves rested beside her now instead of hiding beneath sleeves. The swelling in her wrists had gone down, though occasional tremors still passed through her fingers without warning. Across the room, two older grandmasters whispered while studying one of her matches on a tablet. She baited him into overextending the bishop. No, she baited him into underestimating her patience. Ava heard them. She pretended not to. The truth was, she still did not fully trust good moments yet. Trauma made joy feel temporary, like the world could snatch it away if you relaxed too soon. Ethan Cole dropped into the chair across from her, holding 2 coffees. "You look terrifying when you study openings." Ava glanced up. "You look exhausted when you try compliments." He slid 1 coffee toward her. "Black, 2 sugars." Ava raised an eyebrow. "You remembered," Ethan shrugged. "You beat me often enough. I started paying attention to survival details." Ava laughed softly. The sound surprised both of them. Ethan leaned back in the chair. "You know, half the tournament thinks we hate each other." "We kind of did." "Past tense already?" Ava took a careful sip of coffee. Life has been busy lately. That sobered him immediately. The room quieted around them for a second. Ethan looked down at her hands resting near the chessboard. "Do they still hurt?" "Sometimes." "Bad sometimes?" Ava flexed her fingers slowly. "At night mostly, or when I get tense." Ethan nodded once. Then he said something she did not expect. "You do not have to pretend around me." Ava looked at him carefully. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck. "Everybody keeps treating you like some symbol now. Like every sentence around you needs to become inspirational." His jaw tightened slightly. "That has to be exhausting." Ava stared at the coffee cup in her hands. "It is." For a moment, neither spoke. The practice hall hummed quietly around them. Chess clocks clicked. Rain tapped glass. Somewhere in the lobby below, silverware clinked against plates from the lunch service. Normal sounds. Beautiful sounds. Ethan finally broke the silence. "I watched the whole airport footage." Ava's shoulders stiffened automatically. Ethan noticed and immediately regretted bringing it up. "Sorry." "No," Ava said quietly. "It is okay." But it was not okay. Not really. Some nights she still woke up hearing the sharp plastic sound of zip ties tightening. Some mornings her body panicked before her mind understood why. Healing was not cinematic, it was repetitive, messy, slow. Ethan looked directly at her. You know what bothered me most? Ava waited. You kept being polite after they stopped treating you like a person. The sentence hit harder than sympathy ever could, because it was true. Ava lowered her eyes. My dad always told me angry black girls get punished twice in America. First for existing, then for reacting. Ethan sat very still after that. Across the hall, Jonathan Carter stood near the entrance, speaking quietly with tournament director Simon Fletcher. Several executives from European aviation groups had approached him throughout the week, offering support, partnerships, condolences. Jonathan accepted politely, but his attention kept drifting back toward Ava, always Ava. Simon followed his gaze. She seemed stronger today. Jonathan gave a small nod. She is learning the difference between surviving and living. Simon looked thoughtful. That takes time. Jonathan's expression darkened slightly. Sometimes too much. Before Simon could answer, Olivia Green approached, carrying her phone. Jonathan, you need to see this. She handed him the screen. A live press conference. Senator Richard Whitmore stood behind a podium in Washington, with cameras flashing around him. Victoria Whitmore sat in the front row beside legal counsel, her posture stiff and controlled. The senator adjusted his tie. My family deeply regrets the unfortunate incident involving Miss Carter. Jonathan's face hardened immediately. Olivia lowered her voice. Wait. On screen, the senator continued. However, we must also acknowledge that public judgment without full context can destroy lives. My wife has received threats, harassment, calls for violence. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Then came the line that changed the room. No evidence has proven racial intent. Simon exhaled sharply. Olivia muttered under her breath, Coward. Jonathan watched the screen carefully. The senator continued speaking about misunderstandings, pressure, emotional escalation, complex environments. Every polished phrase carried the same message underneath. This was unfortunate, but not systemic, not intentional, not really about race. Jonathan handed the phone back slowly. They still think this is about protecting reputation. Olivia crossed her arms. They are trying to survive politically. Jonathan looked toward Ava across the room. No, his voice stayed calm. They are trying to survive morally without changing. That evening, Ava played her semifinal match under live international broadcast. The ballroom lights felt hotter tonight, brighter, the audience larger. She sat across from reigning European champion Henrik Dahl, 40 years old, brilliant, cold. Henrik studied her carefully while the cameras zoomed in. You have become very famous very quickly, he said before the match began. Ava met his eyes calmly. I would have preferred another method. A faint smile touched Henrik's mouth. Fair answer. The clock started. The match exploded immediately into aggressive tactical play. Henrik attacked hard, fast. He pushed pieces forward with the confidence of a man trying to pressure weakness before it stabilized. And for a while, it worked. 20 minutes in, Ava's breathing shortened. Her right hand trembled while reaching for a rook. The piece slipped slightly. Henrik noticed. The audience noticed. Across the room, Jonathan noticed. Ava's pulse climbed fast. Not now. Please, not now. The ballroom suddenly felt too warm, too crowded, the cameras too close. Henrik leaned back, watching her carefully, not cruelly, clinically, like a competitor sensing blood in the water. Ava closed her eyes for 1 second. Then she heard another voice in memory. Loretta Gaines at JFK. Do not let this place become bigger than your life. Ava inhaled slowly. The tremor remained. But panic did not own the entire room anymore. She reopened her eyes and saw the board clearly. Henrik had overcommitted his queenside attack. 1 weak square, 1 impatient pawn push, 1 opening. Ava moved her bishop quietly. The audience leaned forward. Henrik's expression changed instantly. He saw it too late. 3 moves later, his king stood trapped behind his own pieces. Checkmate. The ballroom erupted. Not polite applause this time. Loud, uncontrolled. People stood. Phones rose into the air. Commentators nearly shouted into microphones. Henrik stared at the board for several long seconds before finally looking up at Ava. Remarkable, he said softly. Ava sat frozen for a moment, breathing hard, not because she won. Because for the first time since the airport, she had forgotten to be afraid while doing something she loved. That realization hit her harder than victory. As she stood, the crowd continued clapping around her. Jonathan remained near the back wall, proud, quiet, his eyes shining just slightly under the ballroom lights. A reporter pushed toward him immediately. "Mr. Carter, how does it feel watching your daughter become a global symbol of resilience?" Jonathan looked past the microphones toward Ava, surrounded by players and cameras. Then he answered carefully, "I think people keep using the word symbol because it feels safer than admitting she's simply a young woman who deserved dignity from the beginning." The reporter lowered the microphone slightly. Jonathan continued, "What happened to Ava should not have required courage. It should have required basic humanity from the adults around her." Across the ballroom, Ava finally looked up and met her father's eyes. And for the first time since gate B42, she no longer looked like someone trying to escape the worst moment of her life. She looked like someone walking beyond it. The final match began under lights so bright Ava could see every faint tremor in her own hands. The tournament hall was packed. Rows of spectators filled the room from wall to wall. Cameras stood on tripods at the back. Commentators whispered behind glass. Outside, London rain slid down the windows, soft and steady, but inside the hall, every sound felt sharpened. A chair creaked, a clock clicked. Someone breathed too loudly near the front row. Ava sat at the board wearing her black compression gloves. Her hair was pulled back. Her charcoal hoodie was gone. Tonight, she wore a simple navy blazer over a white shirt, not because anyone told her to dress differently, but because she wanted to choose how she entered the room. Across from her sat Ethan Cole. He was calm now, no smirk, no easy joke, just focus. Before the arbiter started a round, Ethan leaned forward slightly. "No pity tonight." Ava looked at him. "Good." He nodded. No headline treatment either. Ava's mouth lifted for half a second. Even better. The arbiter stepped between them. Players ready. Ava placed her fingers near the pieces. Her right wrist pulsed with a dull ache. Not unbearable, just present. A reminder written in nerves. Jonathan sat in the third row, not the first. Ava had asked him to sit farther back. She did not want to look up and see fear on his face after every move. He had accepted. That was love too. Not rushing in, not taking over, letting her stand. The clock started. Ethan opened sharp, fast, clean. He pushed for imbalance immediately, forcing Ava into complicated lines where instinct mattered more than memory. He knew her style. He knew her strengths. He also knew where injury could become pressure. Ava answered calmly. Night out, pawn forward. Bishop tugged back. The game moved fast. The audience held its breath. After 10 minutes, the position became dangerous. Ethan sacrificed a pawn for activity, then another. His pieces swarmed toward Ava's king. The commentators behind the glass leaned closer to their monitors. Jonathan watched Ava's shoulders, still level, her breathing, still controlled. Then the tremor came, small at first. A flicker through her right hand as she reached for the queen. The piece wobbled under her fingers. A murmur moved through the room like wind passing over dry leaves. Ava heard it. Of course she heard it. For one heartbeat, the board blurred. Not from tears, from memory. The airport chair, the cuff, the plastic cutting deeper. Melissa's voice, Victoria's cold stare. People watching. People doing nothing. Ava's hand stopped over the queen. The clock kept running. Ethan looked at her, not unkindly, but he did not stop the clock. He could not. This was the final. Compassion did not mean surrender. Respect meant playing honestly. Ava lowered her hand to the table. Breathe. 1, 2, 3. She looked at the board again. Not the cameras, not the crowd, not the scars. The board. 64 squares. One truth at a time. She picked up the queen and moved it. Firm. Precise. The murmur died. Ethan's eyes narrowed. He had seen something in her move that did not fit his calculation. The next 5 moves came like falling glass. Click, move, click, move. Each clock press echoed. Ethan attacked on the left. Ava ignored it. Ethan checked. Ava stepped away. Ethan pushed harder. Ava gave him space. Too much space, some thought. Jonathan felt Olivia Green shift beside him. She whispered, "Is she in trouble?" Jonathan did not take his eyes off the board. "I do not know." That was the truth. And for once, he allowed the truth to stand without trying to manage it. Ethan leaned in. His face sharpened. He smelled victory now. So did half the room. Ava's king looked trapped. Her clock was lower. Her hand had begun to shake again. Then Ethan made the move everyone expected. Queen to the open file, a direct threat, a loud move, a move designed to end the story. Ava did not react. She stared at the board, and something inside her went very quiet. Not empty, clear. All week, people had talked about her comeback, her courage, her pain, her father, her scars, the video, the lawsuit, the airline reforms, but none of that could move a bishop. None of that could calculate a mating net. Only Ava could do that. She reached for her rook. Her fingers trembled once, then steadied. She slid the rook across the board. Check. The room froze. Ethan blinked. He looked once, then again. His hand hovered over his king. There was no easy square. He moved. Ava answered instantly. Bishop takes. Check. Ethan's jaw tightened. The crowd leaned forward. Another move. Another check. Then Ava pushed a quiet pawn, a small move, almost gentle. Ethan's face changed. He saw it. The trap had not started on that move. It had started 12 moves earlier, when Ava seemed to retreat, when she seemed afraid, when everyone assumed she was surviving. She had been building. Ava's clock showed only seconds left. Ethan searched. His fingers moved from piece to piece without touching. His eyes flicked across the board, faster now, less certain. Then he stopped. There was no defense. Ava lifted her queen. Her hand shook, but the piece did not fall. She placed it down with a soft wooden tap. Checkmate. For 1 second, there was no sound. Then the hall exploded. People stood. Chairs scraped back. Applause hit the room like thunder. Ethan remained still, staring at the board. Then he looked up at Ava and gave a slow nod. No excuses. No pity. Only respect. He extended his hand. You earned that. Ava shook it. This time, her grip was not strong, but it was steady enough. Jonathan stood in the third row. He did not clap at first. He could not move. His daughter was sitting under bright lights, hands bandaged under gloves, face wet with tears she had not noticed yet. She had not erased what happened. Nothing could erase it. But she had added something new, a victory, a choice, a future. When Ava finally turned toward him, Jonathan clapped once, then again. Then the whole row around him joined louder. Olivia wiped her eyes without pretending otherwise. Later on stage, Ava held the trophy with both hands. The camera zoomed close, catching the faint tremor in her fingers. She did not hide it. A reporter called from below. Ava, what do you want people to remember from your story? The hall quieted. Ava looked down at the trophy, then at the crowd. She thought about Gate B42, about Loretta Gaines, about Tyler telling the truth too late, but still telling it, about Dr. Bennett teaching her that rest was not weakness, about Ethan giving her a real game instead of pity. Then she spoke. Remember that dignity should not depend on how someone is dressed, or how old they are, or what seat they are sitting in. People should not need a powerful father, a viral video, or a public scandal to be treated like human beings. Her voice shook slightly, but it did not break. And if you see someone being humiliated, do not look away. Looking away is how harm gets permission. The applause came slower this time, deeper, less like celebration, more like understanding. Across the ocean, at airports around America, new training videos would later show a shortened version of Ava's case. Not to shame one crew forever, but to teach a simple truth too many systems forget. Verify before accusing, listen before escalating, see the person before the problem. Months later, Ava would still have hard days. Some mornings, her wrists would ache. Some nights, the sound of plastic snapping would wake her from sleep. Healing did not arrive like applause. It came quietly, in therapy rooms, in honest conversations, in the courage to try again when nobody was watching. But on that night in London, Ava Carter walked off the stage, not as the girl dragged from first class, not as the billionaire's daughter, not as a symbol built for other people's comfort. She walked off as herself, a young woman who had been underestimated, wounded, doubted, and watched by the world. And still she moved. If Ava's story reminded you that respect should never be reserved for the powerful, take a moment to like this video, subscribe for more stories that speak to justice and healing, and comment these 3 words below. Never stay silent.